Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me is the very understanding Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
So, sometimes we like to highlight certain areas of South Florida that are getting an injection of investment and a look by both the public and private sector. And today we thought that we would have a bit of a highlight of Homestead, which is an area with a rich history and a lot of moving parts in the city of Homestead. Right, Jennifer?
Yes. I love Homestead. A lot of people, kind of think of the whole area of Homestead and the Redland, but today they're separate, right? But today we're going to focus on the actual city of Homestead and particularly on a really exciting lease that they're getting ready to do to revamp their Homestead Sports Complex. The Homestead Sports Complex is about 130 acres and has been used for ball fields and everything. But now a group of investors have come in, and it looks like it's not signed yet. It's not a done deal yet, but it looks like everybody is pretty much in agreement that there is going to be a ground lease and development agreement between the city and a company called VSGS Facilities for 112.5 acres. And they're going to be developing this property. Developing, I say lightly, they're going to be enhancing this property, but they will be adding a hotel and they'll be adding a sports academy along the lines of what was once the Nick Bolletieri Tennis Complex up in Brandenton that is currently known as IMG Academy. That is a much bigger facility, but very, very popular. And basically, this academy is going to be a boarding school for kids that are getting specialized training that shows some promise in a given sport and that are going to be given specialized training.
Is the company that's making this investment and that's going to run it, is it an international company or?
So it's a local company here, but the investors are mostly international, mostly Latin American sports. There's Juan Mónaco, who is a big tennis star. There's Mariano Zabaleta, who was also very big on the tennis court, and famous soccer players, famous football players, American football. So there's a pretty good group of principals in there with a lot of knowledge, not only on the sports themselves, but on training, a lot of name recognition, and from a diverse sports and also diverse backgrounds. And pretty big followings.
It's really interesting because so many years ago, you could add as many years as you want. I used to play tennis all the time. I was an avid fan. I loved it. I'm still a big fan. But I remember that at that time, the Miami Open was known as the NASDAQ Open, and it would happen in Crandon Park in Key Biscayne, and it was always 4 wonderful days of tennis. And I remember that throughout the world, the NASDAQ Open in Miami was always known as the 5th Grand Slam, right? And part of the reason why is because, a great majority of tennis pros actually live in Key Biscayne, and I think they still do so, which is why the Miami Open still gathers, so much attention. So I think that this is like the perfect place for such an academy. I had asked you if it was international because I also learned, and look, we've spoken about this before, how Miami is unique among cities around the world. It's one of the few cities that has every major sport but it also has Formula One. It has the tennis. It has NASCAR, and and now we're going to welcome in the World Cup, to South Florida and to the U.S. very shortly, which is, extremely exciting. But I remember that when we had those 17 and a half acres up for sale, I got a lot of calls from this international group called La Liga, and they're looking for a space where they can actually create an academy that is a combination of a sports academy with a high school, but it's really for international players, and it was going to be centered around soccer. Right. Football. So it's really interesting how the development of that type of, combination of sports and, sports development it's making its way here to South Florida.
Yeah, it's super interesting, how Miami has evolved as a sports tourism capital.
Yeah.
I can predate you. You say it was NASDAQ. I remember when that tennis was the Lipton.
The Lipton. No, I remember the Lipton too. Yeah, you're right.
So
you're right.
I can wait.
You're absolutely right. Yeah,
so
that's right.
For a competition,
that's right. We should have gone for it. That's right. I should have gone a little further back. That's right. And at some point, the Miami Grand Prix was run in downtown Miami with closed streets and all stuff.
I remember that. I remember sitting in friends. He was with Holland and Knight, and he had a great view of the Grand Prix racetrack. So
I remember I used to work in a clothing store downtown when I was in high school, and when the Grand Prix would come, we would hear the sound of the engines passing by. Back then they were V12 engines. It wasn't a hybrid like it is today. So the sound was really, really pronounced, especially as they were going through in between buildings. So, that sound resonates, but it's really incredible. Yeah, I do remember the Lipton for sure. Now, I find it interesting when you're developing, so it's 130 acres. Is there going to be housing in there?
So what they're doing is they're actually going to be using 112 of the lease itself from what I've reviewed of the lease. And this is still kind of been drafted, hasn't been executed, but they did have a meeting on July 30th. They called a special meeting to get city council approval because they had to bring a lot of, players to the table, right? There's Keys Gate. There's a charter school at Keys Gate that currently has access. This is a community park. So when is the community going to have access to it if it's now being used for academic training? And then also the rodeo. So they are also building, in addition to the hotel and revamping all of the fields, they're also adding a hotel, and they're adding a 10,000-seat stadium. So now the rodeo is going to move from Harris Field, where the rodeo currently is, into this other one. So now that also frees up Harris Field for the city of Homestead to do some cool things with and to update. So there were a lot of players. It was, it's a super interesting project, and I have to give a huge shout out to Mayor Lossner, Stephen Lossner, the mayor of the city of Homestead, and the entire, city council and the city manager, because it's, it was a huge task, and all of the players themselves that got involved with the design of this and everybody working together. It was very, very positive. The feedback that they got from the community. Right. But I think the important, some people might say, well, how, what's the big deal? What's so great about a sports thing? There's not a lot of industry down there. We need to bring higher paying jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But in my opinion, this is huge, right? Because this is... There's not much down there, right? Homestead is the entrance to the Keys. It's the entrance to the Florida Everglades, and it's bordered. So that, you've got the bay on one side, Florida Keys to the south. You've got the Everglades to the west, and then up north, you've got, all of the suburbs of Miami. So the vision that the city has, and they've been very intentional in terms of how they're building it, because in the past, it has been a place where just because of the price of land and the fact that there is so much land available, it's where everybody's gone to kind of build the affordable housing and everything else. And the city has a much bigger vision, right? They don't just want to be known for affordable housing. They've got the Homestead Reserve Air Force Base down there, and it's great potential for manufacturing with the big new beautiful bill that came out. There's all sorts of incentives there, and the amount of
there's also a lot of opportunity zones, and I don't think it was really addressed yet, but I know that there has been a lot of talk at a federal level to revamp the opportunity zones, to maybe even reset the dates, because they felt that it wasn't launched properly and that we couldn't really make the best use of the structure. They liked the structure, but the timeline, and there was a lot of time that it took for people to really understand the dynamics of opportunity zones. And you mentioned Homestead Air Force Base, and I remember that from what I remember, one of the most significant events in South Florida was Hurricane Andrew, and I remember that Hurricane Andrew really hit Homestead terribly. And then there was news about the closing down of the Homestead Air Force Base. So it kind of felt like over the last 30 years, Homestead had a couple of deaths, right? Because these were pivotal moments that were incredibly impactful to the economy of Homestead. But along the lines of what you mentioned, it's just funny because I know people don't believe us that we don't plan these podcasts, but we really don't. But yesterday I'm listening to a presentation. It's from a local commissioner that was talking about the importance of designating the Homestead Air Force Base as a spaceport.
I was going to bring that up.
Okay. And also the Miami Executive Airport as a spaceport. And what he was basically referencing is, so this was designated in July of last year. It was actually by our Senator, Alexis Calatayud, who, pushed it forward. But one of the things that happens is that there is no expectation, right, that there's going to be, rocket launches, right, out of Miami. But it gives you the ability, if you are designated as a spaceport, number one, to get some of these contracts when it comes to the actual manufacturing and development of anything that is related to space and to aerospace. And it gives you access to state money for the development of this. We've spoken about this. There is a burgeoning, growth of this industry of aerospace, and it looks like Florida is set up to be its beneficiary.
Yeah, and we have an episode coming up later in the year that will dive into spaceports. But I wanted to focus on this because we mentioned it in the Avanti report, the importance of the sports economy. And I think that sometimes that can be overlooked. We've highlighted on a bunch of different episodes the amount of money that something like
Formula One
brings in, the NFL when we have the Super Bowl brings in, the expectation for what we're going to have with the World Cup. And so I just wanted to throw out
and to your point, look at what a city like Miami Gardens has done with its negotiation with Formula One. It was a 10-year original contract. They're 3 years in, and they already extended it for another 10 years, right? They gave a substantial amount of money to the city itself, and there were some guarantees that there were going to be a lot of local jobs that were created. And then if you think about the economic impact, we always year over year have spoken about the economic impact of the Super Bowl, but imagine that's a one-year event, right? That's a one-time event that you probably get every 5 years. This is guaranteed, 20 years of this major, international event.
Right. And I wanted to do a comparison just because of I still refer to it as the Nick Bolletieri Academy, even though it's IMG Academy. But they did an article in WUSF in January of 2024 talking about sports tourism.
Were you a big Andre Agassi fan?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I still am. Sports tourism business. And this is in Manatee County alone. It was $300 million, and Manatee County doesn't have a ton of sports stuff. The Nick Bolletieri School is in Brandenton, and then I know they have a lot of soccer tournaments, and they host a lot of traveling tourism actually for kids and teenage traveling teams. So anyway, Pete Harvey, who's the director of sports for Visit Sarasota, said in that article that the industry itself around the country has exploded just just looking for the fiscal year, and this is again 2024, they were looking at $80 million economic impact from amateur sports tourism. So that's not including, that's a whole different side, right? That's not including the NASCAR and the Lipton and the professional golf tournaments. It's talking about kids' sports. And he said that for his area, it really helped them erase the line between the traditional tourist season and off-season, allowing them to diversify the amount of visitors that came into Brandenton on a year-round basis. Yeah. And in our Avanti Way report that we did earlier in May, we highlighted the impact that sports have had on the Miami area. The Formula One Grand Prix generated $450 million worth of impact in 2024, which was up almost 30% from 2022. And overall sports tourism in Miami-Dade County generated $13.2 billion in direct sales. So again, that doesn't even take into account what something like this can do for the city of Homestead. Obviously, it's also going to bring other events down to the area and can provide a lot of synergy with things that are already going on in the area. So I'm just super, super excited. I think this is going to be a great deal for the city. I think it's going to be great, obviously, for the investors, and I think it's really going to help.
Do you think there's a future in which the Miami Open is held at a place like this?
Probably. I don't know, because it's small. It's only a 10,000 seat stadium, so I don't think so. I think the Hard Rock right now is still the best bet for that event.
They built an entire facility.
Yeah, they built a whole facility, and it's easier. You know, you can draw from all sorts of different areas. True. This is going to be way more destination, I think, based. You know, and what's great about that is that it's the complex during non-school times, like during the summer, a lot of these kids will go home. So then you have programs for local community. There's separate hours for the local community to be involved and have different events. Yeah. The city worked out something where there are a certain number of events that they're allowed to sponsor every year. There's shared revenue sources. It was just, such a
and it definitely feels like plan. There's so much going on in the city because, I drive by, if you're making the travel from west to east in the Palmetto, you can't help but watch the incredible fast-paced development of the MLS, our own MLS stadium. It's incredible how quickly they have built that, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that grows. I also, it's just funny because yesterday, I was reading about something that the Yankees are doing that I find really interesting because maybe it is a sign of things to come. The Yankees built this stadium, their new stadium, for $2.3 billion, right? Which at the time was the highest that anybody has ever paid for building a stadium. I think the original Yankee Stadium was $2.4 million, just to give you an idea, right? But what the Yankees announced is that now they're going to do an upgrade and renovation of this stadium, which is only, I think, 10 years old maybe, that is going to be $6.4 billion. And that it's aiming at changing basically the way that the fans experience the game and experience the stadium. There's going to be cutting edge seating and improved, sidelines for comfort, immersive digital experiences, expanded dining and hospitality, and, of course, upgraded player facilities and a lot of stuff. It really is interesting how, I think, as the value of these franchises have gone up, that people are now looking into, well, what is it that we need to do to elevate the experience for the fans? And, it really is interesting because for years we've spoken about how retail, increasingly has become more of an experiential play, and you have to have that balance. Many years ago, people didn't want to have more than 12% of their, shopping centers be restaurants, right? That game has changed dramatically. And now it feels like this idea of having an experience has gone beyond just the experience that is on the field more to how people feel about, attending the stadium, the comfort level, what that experience is like. So,
well, and I can't remember where I heard it, but Mark Cuban, I can't remember if it was an interview or something that he wrote or posted, but he was saying that with AI and the lingering effects of the pandemics and social media becoming a bigger role in everybody's life, that as humans, we're social animals, and that the importance of having really good experience offerings and opportunities where people can go in person to experience them is going to be so much more important than it has been in the past, because we're becoming more isolated as a society with tech and everything. So I thought that was fascinating. And again, I think this is going to be a small catalyst for so many more opportunities, because just think about it. I don't know, I haven't done a deep dive into like how many students they're going to have or anything, but parents coming to drop off their kids, or parents' weekends, where are they going to go to eat? Where are they going to, what are they going to go visit? What are they going to go see? Granted, they're going to go to the Keys. They're probably going to go explore the Everglades. Maybe some of them are going to be like, I don't want to see alligators and mosquitoes. So, but what kind of restaurants are they going to want? What kind of other retail, or not just experiences, but what other needs are there going to be, right? The Target down there is going to be huge if the kids have to, outfit with sheets and everything their own. I don't know if it's going to be the same as dorm rooms, et cetera, where you bring your own sheets in college or you decorate your own. So I just think that this is going to be a catalyst, and a lot of people are going to look at this like a big deal. It's a park. I think this should be looked at for that area as an economic driver of things to come, and be looking to the future needs of everybody who is going to be using that facility in all of the different capacities, from the rodeo to the stadium to the parents visiting, etc. And get in now. Get in now. So there's a ton of opportunity. There's a lot of space available for rent on Main Street. Downtown Homestead is super, super quaint, and the city really wants to keep it that way. They don't want super, super high density. They want quality tenants and people in there. And so far, like right now, the average income doesn't, or the median income doesn't align with a lot of the big national chains. So it's a great time for somebody to get in there and get in on the ground floor and maybe get a really good lease terms, etc.
Just like we talk about, when we were speaking about 1031 exchange, if the deal is not good, the 1031 exchange is not going to make it better, right? So the deal has to make sense. But when you're looking at, a significant investment that is being made, and the approach, and really the fact that it just feels like there's something in the air about the continued interest and conversations that are happening around Homestead, that it is a good opportunity to look at, deals that are happening there, and opportunities that may be available. So I think that is an important point to make. So, all right. Well, listen, if you have an area in South Florida that you want us to explore, something big that's happening that you want us to discuss, please share it with us. As always, thank you for listening to the two of us ramble on and on. And as always, we are very happy to hear any feedback from the podcast. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. Say bye, Jennifer.
Bye. Or
bye,
go
everybody.
play ball, or I feel like that should have been some sports closing.
Some sports. You got it.
Start your engines.
There you go. All right. All right, guys. All the best.